Shalom and welcome to Practical Spirituality here at Esha Torah in the Old City of Jerusalem overlooking the Temple Mount. Now, speaking of the Temple Mount is where this great service took place. And this service is it's a international style, kind of a universal thing. What does that mean? It's a universal thing. There's offerings. I think no matter what culture you go to, unless it's a atheist, Western, nihilistic culture, there's offerings. Although even the Western atheist nihilist still has offerings. You understand? Because let's say they want to go to gym, but their spouse says, you know, can you please come home? That's a sacrifice. And the sacrifice is that there should be a better relationship with someone. And that's all we're doing with God. The same thing is we're letting go of, we're going to release something. We're going to let go of something. It might be our money. It might be an animal if you're a farmer. It might be spices that you've grown for incense offerings. But you understand that every decision you make is a sacrificial moment. Because a decision, it comes from the word decide. The word decide means to eliminate, like homicide, suicide, right? Genocide means to eliminate. So every decision you make, there's certain things you're letting go of there. There's things you're eliminating in that process of elimination. To make that decision, that's your sacrifice. And in that sacrifice is the power of what you did. Meaning things are only powerful in as much as you made a sacrifice. One example that I like to give, which brings back the surfing years, is, let me just make a bracha on this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nivru. Brings back the surfing years was, even though I'm still surfing and hopefully surfing this week. If anyone wants to join me, by the way, to surf, please God, we're going to have some waves this week. It reminds me of the sacrifice of my entire life in Israel. That the year I came here, with zero intention of staying here, like I really had no reason to stay here in my mind or heart. I was only coming to Israel because I got a free ticket. And I needed to get to my tour. I was surfing. I was going to surf France, Spain, Portugal, which I'd done the previous year with the Pro Tour. And then I was going to surf from Portugal. I was going to cross over to Morocco, which is still a major bucket list. Please God, I'll hit Morocco this year. By the way, any Moroccans listening might want to join me on the Morocco trip. But I'm doing a surf trip in Morocco. I do executive travel. I have an executive travel company, actually. And I travel with people and show them a really intense time in exotic locations. And while they're all sleeping off the previous night's indulgences, I wake up at sunrise and surf for 2 hours. So I generally do these either with excellent mountain biking or excellent surfing. And Morocco is an excellent surfing location. It may actually have good mountain biking, come to think of it. I didn't even think about that. Anyways, I was going to do France, Spain, Portugal, Morocco, South Africa, Australia, and then swing on back towards, do Southeast Asia and stuff, and then come back to California. It was a major trip planned, and it was going to be for 2 years. And due to my father's bankruptcy, because I was a trust baby, Rastafarian, which is called a Trustafarian, due to my father's bankruptcy, I flew. He didn't have money to send me on my graduation trip, 2-year excursion, and so I got a free ticket to Israel. Now, just to give a little background, that 5-year expanse between when I started university and I finished took 5 years because I took every class, pass, no pass, and so I would just no pass 2 and then pass 1, and I mean sometimes I passed 3, sometimes I passed 2, but I only took classes that had multiple guess exams. I know you call them multiple choice, but we call them multiple guess, and I call them multiple guess, and when you have a Jewish IQ, and that's not a racist comment, you just go online and find out the IQ of Jews. When you have a Jewish IQ, the chance of passing on a multiple guess exam is extremely high. And So that's basically, I didn't pass them all. I had plenty of no passes, believe me. And I mean, some of this stuff was like, I didn't even know what they were talking about. But long story short, after those 5 years not a long story short, those 5 years were spent in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara is a university campus. That's the UCSB, You Can Study Buzzed, is the highest population west of the highest concentration population west of the Mississippi. And everyone's between the ages of 18 and 22. Can you imagine what's going on over there? Yeah, it was crazy. A magazine, I'll leave nameless, named it #1 party school for close to 20 years. And here, 30 years later, it's number 6 still, which is just, it really is out there. Anyway, but the reason I was there was because it has this actual population in Santa Barbara, where the campus is and all the housing is surrounded on all sides by surf spots. And so it's just the ultimate surfers destination, unless you have a drought. If California goes into drought, then it becomes like its name, Pacified, Pacific. It becomes like a lake. All 5 years I was there, it was like a lake. So anywhere I surfed, I either had to drive hours or I had to fly for those 5 years. I come to Jerusalem on this trip here that seems to still be going on now, 28 years later, but I came on this trip that never ended. And guess what? El Nino, the climate system called El Nino, is a shift it has to happen twice every 7 years. You never know when, but twice every 7 years is the pattern. And that was the El Nino year. El Nino year means there's a jet stream shift. That's called El Nino. El Nino is the name of JC, actually. He's called the little one. And so they call it El Nino. I kind of like that too, because when Jews think about JC, it's hard for us not to think about all the hell they put us through. Christians put us through hell. And that's the same thing that happens on the El Nino year, is there's flooding and landslides and every kind of disaster happens during the El Nino year. Except surfers love it because the waves are huge. And the whole jet stream shifts south, so the waves that the Northern Californians usually get to enjoy, suddenly the Southern Californians get to enjoy. And we're getting really big waves. So of course, the year I come to Israel, landlocked in Jerusalem, in yeshiva, is the El Nino year. That was a really long story for me explaining that things are only as powerful as what you sacrifice. And so for me to live 5 years in the ultimate venue for an El Nino year and then move to Israel on the El Nino year, where the surf spots for 5 years I was waiting to come on are now blasting with waves every single day for the entire winter. And I was sitting here, it was the coldest winter. Whenever there's El Nino, Israel gets like frozen winters. And we had 3 weeks of snow at one point on the ground. And this is back when Aish Torah wasn't very financially stable at the time. So we had rationed heat. You could have an hour when you go to bed at night. An hour, 2 hours at night at bedtime, and an hour in the morning for wake up. It was on a timer, you couldn't shift it. And so we were all in mummy bags. And I'm thinking about Southern California's waves. And I wake up every morning, all I kept out of my sleeping bag was my mouth and my nose. And every morning I'd wake up and open up the zip, that little thing, and then I'd just see steam rising up out of the sleeping bag into the ice cold air. And I would always say to myself, what the hell am I doing here? The power of that decision, though, was the sacrifice. The power of that decision to learn Torah. My sacrifice to God was this, lifestyle and sport that I dedicated everything to, like full commitment to. I dedicated. And this comes in a sentence that we say every day, 3 times a day, is ve'ahavta, that you shall love God with all your heart and all your soul But the third one is all your very, and it's called me'odecha, but doesn't translate well. All your very. What is your very? Your very is what you very much would not like to give up for God. So there's certain things that you just don't want to give up. You probably already know a few of them. A couple of things you just don't want to give up. That's your very. Anything you very much, it's either stuff you don't want to give up that you're already doing that you shouldn't be doing, or it's stuff that you need to start doing, but it just cramps your style. Like for example, a girl raised secular in Florida. Where clothing in Florida, you can go to a clothing store in Florida, in Miami, that doesn't have enough fabric in the entire store to clothe one woman's body once. And if you're raised that way, and then discover Judaism and realize that you're actually, your soul is part of God and your body is the temple, and just like a Torah scroll goes on, it's first got a belt, to hold it together, obviously, but it's first got a belt, and then it's got a jacket, and then it's got usually a breastplate on it, and a crown, and then it's put in a safe, which has also usually beautiful wooden doors, and then, because you got to keep the Torahs in a fireproof safe inside the ark, and the ark is the safe, and then it's but a real combo safe, because you got to open it on Shabbos, and then it's got wooden doors, some kind of beautiful doors usually, and then it's got a curtain, and but you're a girl from Miami, so for that girl from Miami to treat herself like a Torah might be very much me'odecha, like with all my very, because this is very hard for me to do. And I suggest if a girl decides she's going to come to learn Torah in Israel, and she's from Miami, that she comes in December. It'll make it easier. Now, that we're just going to call a class. By the way, that was a class of sacrifice. Let me see if I want to say something else about sacrifice. Okay, I don't. So when you came to Jerusalem, you came to the temple, and the temple service is something that's universal. It has offerings, and we mentioned offerings, and it has music. And you'll notice no matter where you go universally in this world, where people do their service, there's usually music. And then it also has smells, incense, and there's crystals, like precious stones involved. Crystals are quartz crystals and stuff like that. So the precious stones there. And you have people who are in a state of surrender, which is all mystical traditions come only with a state of surrender. Do you know why that is? That for you to achieve a mystical state, you have to have surrender? Or is it just blatantly obvious? What do you think? Should I explain it? Why you need surrender? Well, it could be there's a couple people in the room who would like to have a mystical experience. And so maybe I should explain why surrender is kind of a prerequisite. So what's the opposite of surrender? The opposite of surrender is to hold on, to be poised and postured, but even to go more specifically, is the opposite of surrendered is to still be attached to the upkeep of your own self-image. To be attached to the upkeep of your own self-image. When you surrender your upkeep of your own self-image, when you let yourself be nobody, but really nobody, you've now laid the groundwork. There's other groundwork also. But when you have allowed yourself, the self-image, to disappear and let yourself be nobody, now there's a chance for a mystical moment, to have a mystical experience. So what is it? Why let go of the self-image? I mean, your society's been telling you to have a self-image. Whether it's an observant society where everything's about self-image, or it's the secular society where everything's about self-image. they're both that's a lie. Self-image is a lie. What is it? What is the word image short for? Imagination. So what's a self-image? An imaginary self. It's an imaginary self. Well, if I have an imaginary self that I'm going to defend, by the way, the word image also means pictures, like Google Images, like an image is like an image. The Torah also uses the word image, like a graven image. Don't make graven images. It means a picture of oneself. A sculpture is an image. So what's a self-image then? It's a self-picture. I don't want to go too deep right now, but if you think about this, when did you say cheese for your self-image? Well, it's easy to answer that question. If you had 500 good days, but on day 301 something really nasty happened, let's say you're 8 years old and 500 great days, which of course become a wash, and day 301 some kind of life shock, some kind of embarrassment, a humiliation, something traumatic, something scary happens on day 301. Which day is going to be the day you said cheese? Day 301. That'll be the day you said cheese. And something happened, you let that mean something about you. That became your own little nasty secret about how lame you are. And ever since then, you've been surviving that self-image. So for something to, you have a need for everything to play into the narrative of your life. You understand? You need everything to somehow fit in the file cabinets of your self-image. Which means that that makes you automatically not a vessel for a mystical experience because there is no experience but just an experience of yourself when you're into self-image. You understand? If you're filtering everything based on your own self-image, that means your only experience is an experience of self. So the things you think you're experiencing are really not. It's just stuff filtered through self. It's like when I'm meeting girls, when I'm meeting guys for my girls, I'm meeting potential men to marry my daughters. I've got myself out. I'm now wearing my daughter's eyes and heart and mind and soul, and I mean, I've raised her all these years. I've like, you know, I've got it. You know, I've been watching her since she was born, and so I just put on her eyes and I put on her soul, and then I meet the guy, and I filter this guy through her eyes and see what she thinks. That's how I meet them. And by the way, I'm not the final decision. I'm only the final decision that they can meet. But it certainly screens out anything that would not be good for her, so that she can meet someone who's already someone I filtered out that way. But in other words, but we ourselves are filtering everything through this image, and to have a mystical experience means that you got to let go of this image, which is really a false image. And it's also, I think, a statue is a better terminology for the word image, because the self-image is locked it's stone. It seems unchangeable, unmovable. And so when we drop that self-image, we're free. And if there's a mystical experience to be had, now we've laid the groundwork for that to take place. Is that clear? Now, it's a lot of work, though, to get to a mystical experience. This is just the prerequisite, is the surrender, to get you to that experience. You have to surrender yourself. This is why Moses was chosen for Mount Sinai to be the one to receive the Torah. Moses was chosen because he had the lowest of all self. He had like no self-image, Moses. He had no self-image. And because it wasn't just that God needed someone with no self-image because it's humble. He needs someone with no self-image so he doesn't die. Because something can pop your self-image badly. And you can be, damaged in the experience. Understand? Like the a mystical experience can be a scary thing if you haven't first laid the groundwork for achieving it. And it can be so self-image defeating, let's call it self-defeating, self-image defeating, that it could even be a damaging experience. And so Moses, certainly getting the Torah through prophecy was, anyone else would have been in grave danger. There was actually a better choice than Moses for this job. He was the leader of the Jews at the time, who I think by no coincidence was Moses' brother. But Moses had a brother who was already the leader of Israel. He was the head rabbi of the whole country, whole nation. We didn't have a country yet. And he was leading. He would have been the right guy, except he wouldn't have been able to handle the prophetic experience that Moses was able to handle. And so, even though his brother was the obvious choice as far as leaders go, he couldn't have gotten the Torah. Now, an interesting question, though, and it kind of brings up church and state, is why didn't God choose a priest to handle religion and Aaron to handle state? Aaron's a better leader. Let him lead. And let Moses get the Torah. The answer is that the person who brings down the civil law has to be the person who gets the Torah. You understand? They're together. There's no separation in church and state. They're not supposed to be separated. Now, I have no idea how bad world religions would be for state, but probably pretty bad if we see most democracies want them separated. But Judaism, God forbid, you never separate church and state. They are one. They're bonded eternally. And if you're wondering why, anyone wondering why they're bonded eternally, is that interesting to anybody? The reason they're bonded eternally is because the only reason you could have a moral voice would be because there's a God. Well, what is state? State is, how do you organize a population of people and keep them from killing each other? The answer is you have to create civil law. Well, civil law then is going to be what's called good, and breaking that civil law is what's called bad. Well, where does good and evil come from? Where does good and bad come from? The answer is, well, if there's no God, there is no such thing as good and evil. And I can understand why they would want a separation from the religions. Keep the religions out of it. Let's just create law. And we'll ignore the fact that the only reason you know good and evil is because of God. Because there's a God, and therefore there's got to be something good, and there's got to be something evil. But, like, if you don't believe in that, so then in the end, your society's going to eat itself alive. And then so you have to create civil law. You just keep religion away from it. But Judaism understands that the only reason we have the concept of good and evil is only because there's God. That's the only reason we have good and evil. Where else would you get it? It can only come from a God that you have good and evil. Again, the atheists, Sam Harris would say, something like in after billions of years of people doing things that were against the betterment of society, after billions of years, I don't know how many years is that, hundreds of thousands or a million years or millions of years of human beings doing things that weren't for the betterment, they got somehow, what is it called? It's selected out. It selected itself, and we're just genetically selected to do things that are positive for society. Just like totally cuckoo. Do they use the word cuckoo in the rest of the world? In Israel, cuckoo means crazy.
Ponytail. It's a ponytail.
All sorts of ponytail. Israel's big on the word cuckoo. So, but that's just totally cuckoo. Like, meaning that's just the opposite discussion is that only with God is there good and evil. That's it. If you have a God, so then we've been created, there must be a purpose. Well, I know I have a moral voice inside my heart, And so it must be that I'm supposed to have this tug of war between good and evil inside of me, and choose good. And that's the way we were created. We were created for that. It's not that this is some kind of Darwinian selection that was made over the years. That our predicament of free will is somehow we selected. We're like the survival of the fittest was the ones who think doing good. We're the ones who lasted. Because it's very interesting, because it's the exact opposite of what would select. What would actually select would be the might makes right would do the selection. Just look at the animal kingdom. It's not the one that does the most good wins. It's the one that's usually the most vicious would do the winning. And Hitler was a social Darwinist, and he believed the Jews, because of all the mitzvahs in the Torah, he was quite an expert in it. As far as someone who never went to yeshiva would be called an expert, but he understood that a lot of Judaism is about benevolence and being good and sacrificing yourself for the whole, and to recognize that every single human being has a soul, and every single human being who has that soul, therefore, is part of God and part of the plan. Whereas he would say that not killing the weak would be a disadvantage for what, as a social Darwinist, would believe is to create a master race. And so Judaism says, no, you should be anti-Darwinian and sacrifice yourself, and sacrifice your family. That people are taken care of in the world. And to the betterment of society. Now, maybe Harris would say, yeah, I mean, it's not going to make any sense, but such anti-Darwinian thinking of taking care of others besides your own has over millions of years has somehow that insane voice in your head that's right now it's my daughter's 18th birthday party, and the entire family and extended family are all at the party, and I missed the party to come to. And I knew it was her party. And when they asked me at Aish if I would be teaching the day after my daughter's wedding, when I only got to bed at 5 a.m., maybe I want to take a day off, not to mention my daughter's birthday party. The answer is that no, I'll teach today. I'll make sure people hear a class today from me, and I'll be at the beginning of the party. I'll come for the end of the party. But I won't be at the main part of the party. And in my lack of quantity, I make up for in quality with each of my children, because there's not a ton of quantity. In that I'm here to make a difference in the world. And I make the difference for my children through a very high quality interaction. And then I come out to have high quality interaction with people who are here, these messages. Because let's just take, what's your name? Daniel. If I said anything that Daniel has a better life, so that means that that you are now in a dating pool of a woman who would be interested in a guy who's going for a better life, and the two of you with those goals in mind would raise children with that kind of lifestyle, better lifestyle. And then there's a whole generation now coming out of you. My kids, Baruch Hashem, thank God they're doing really well. And I'd like your kids to be doing really well. But the only way that's going to happen is you get your act together. You got to get your act together so you can get into a dating pool that you can now donate some DNA such that your children will grow up in a household that will not lean too heavily on the system. Please God, not leaning on the legal system. Your kids should not lean on that, and your kids should not lean too much on the welfare system. Rather, your kids should be creating more bounty in the world. And if they really keep seeking the good, well, eventually you seek the good of others. And if we have enough people touched, creating a generation of people seeking the good of others, so then after a while, all those others are doing good too. And so rather than eating cake right now. I'd rather be with you right now and see if we can create a better world as a result. That's why I'm missing my daughter's birthday, and that's a big sacrifice. I offer that sacrifice to bring you closer, to bring us all closer. When you go to stores in Manhattan that are like these trippy stores, you know those trippy stores in like in the Lower East Side, where there's like you can like smell incense and you hear like meditation music coming out, and it's like they usually have like cactus in front. I'm not sure why, and the store's like way overcrowded with tchotchkes and stuff, and you go inside those stores and there's like every kind of incense, and there's sage smudge sticks, and there's a lot of stones and crystals and precious stones in there. And you guys probably don't go in those shops, although those are my favorite shops to go into. But when you think about it, it feels like it's pagan. It feels a little bit pagan over there. You know what I'm talking about? It doesn't feel Jewish. It feels pagan. And because when we think of Judaism, we just think of this sanitary synagogue situation.
A bookstore.
A bookstore. A Judaica store. A delicatessen. Sushi, if you're from New York or East Coast. But if it was service, it would be this sanitary prayer going on in some synagogue somewhere. But in the temple, what took place on that Temple Mount was animal sacrifice, vegetation sacrifice, mineral sacrifice. There was incense wafting in the air. That was way more intense than any incense that's found in those stores. A very, very specific combination of 11 different spices that really would blow your mind. And we take it seriously to the point where to create that combination of those spices and mix them together is the death penalty if it was done not for the temple. Meaning if you just made it, like, hey, let's make it. Like you're just in your kitchen with all the spices and you just, okay, we need this much of that and that much of this, and we get it all measured out and grind it all up and get the whole thing powdered, and it's the death penalty for such a thing. Or you did it for the right reasons, you did it for the temple, and you just happen to wind up with a little vial of it, and you take it off the Temple Mount because you feel like meditating, and you burn some. It's the death penalty. Such a thing. So I promise you, those pagan cultures there's no death penalty when it comes to incense. There's no death penalties. They don't take their incense as seriously as we do. Maybe they take their crystals more seriously than we do. What do you think? The high priest of Israel, the Kohen, he wore a breastplate with 12 precious stones, 12 crystal stones on his breastplate. And when there was a question of national importance, he would ask the breastplate, and the breastplate would actually answer. I don't know how it answered. Did it light up? Did it speak? It would light up?
Letters spelled out.
Oh, because all the names in there? If you go through all the names of the tribe, is every letter accounted for?
No, but there's other letters that like there's like also shifting show in it.
Oh,
all of
so every letter's there.
and it's like Aram Yisrael
Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov is on there too? I thought there were 12 stones, or they're written into some of the stones.
No, I mean like it's like Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Shiv, Tel, Yisrael.
From different stones.
Yeah, it's like broken up.
But there were 12 stones.
Yeah, and then on every stone it's the name and then like,
The name of the tribe.
and then a bit of Arabic Shiftish.
Oh wow! It had. I didn't know that. How do you know that? It was in Talmud.
We read it somewhere.
Yes. So anyway, but it would spell out messages.
Like the keyboard of the telephone, there has the letters will light, and only the Kohen Gadol can understand what the letters will together will what's the meaning.
What's being said? He had the ability to interpret it.
Yes.
That's so interesting. And but back to the pagans. They're really into crystals. Like when you go in those shops, you see some amazing crystals in there. And any New Age shop always has that giant amethyst, like the $10,000 amethyst thing, this tall, which is like my biggest dream, Someday someone's going to donate one of those to me. Yeah, it's going to be someone watching this video is going to say, I'm so not into these stones, and I had a lot of extra money around. I wound up dumping $5,000 on this amethyst. I'm donating it to Rabbi Glazer's meditation room. I have a special meditation room, but I've dreamt forever. I would never spend that kind of money on one of those huge amethysts. You know what I'm talking about? You'll see them in like King Spa, the Korean spa in Queens. It's a big spa. It's a Korean spa. They'll dump some money on such a thing. What?
What does that stone do?
Amethyst?
Yeah.
You just Google it. It'll be really simple. Anyone got their Google around? Just someone Google energy of amethyst. The energy of amethyst. One of our sages says that about those 12 stones that the Kohen Gadol wore, he says, he doesn't say, he's only discussing it in reference to those stones, but he's saying those stones plus the other stones. He says there's no stones of all these precious stones that does not possess great, how do you say kochos, great force, great power above. There's not one precious stone that doesn't have great power above. That's what our...
The amethyst helps with the nervous system, nightmares, insomnia, and the crown chakra.
So...
Only the king, like King David, like he want to ask something about the nation, so they will ask the Kohen Gadol, and the stone will answer. It's about nation.
No, it was never private. It was only of national importance.
Yes.
Okay, but back to the pagans and their crystals in their shops and in their services. Those crystals aren't answering questions. It's not that. You understand? Who takes crystals more seriously, the Jews or the pagans? Who takes crystals more seriously? I'm asking you.
Pagan.
No, the Jews take crystals more seriously, way more seriously.
Today?
What?
Only back then, during the time of the temple.
I'm just saying Judaism. Nothing to do with synagogue Judaism. Nothing about synagogue Judaism. In fact, I'm almost never talking about synagogue Judaism. And even though I go to synagogue, 3 times a day. But so who takes it more seriously, pagans or the Jews? Crystals. Jews. Who takes incense more seriously, pagans or Jews? Jews. Okay, music. Every ceremony out there in India, in China, in Korea, in Mexico, in Africa, in Guatemala. You think there's music in the ceremonies? You bet there's music in those ceremonies, big time. Our temple had a tribe that's job was music. They were called Levites. And their job was to develop great expertise on all these different instruments. And the Talmud says that there were thousands of them playing at once, meaning thousands of musicians playing, and there were thousands of singers in a giant choral, a giant choir. and the and it was so loud. It was so loud that the Talmud says that you could hear it under certain wind conditions. It would go all the way down Wadi Kelt, the valley of Kelt, and you could hear the music in Jericho. And if you know where Jericho is geographically, it's just below us, but it's, in a car you could get to Jericho probably in about a half hour, at 100 kilometers per hour. But you can hear it in Jericho. That's how loud it was. So it was like a wall of sound. I mean, thousands of musicians. Anyone been to the symphony, how much symphony orchestra is? 50, 70? I forget. Can you just check how big a symphony orchestra is? There's a number.
Given number?
Yeah, it's a given number. Yeah, there's different size ones, but there's a standard. And anyway, but if you've been to a symphony, it didn't lack volume. It's a lot. Why do you think 10 violin players just sound very different than one? And I don't remember how many violinists. Full
100.
100. So, and it's loud in there. And it's just loud without a speaker system. It's loud to go to the symphony. And but it was much louder. It was like 5 times louder than going to a symphony. And there was a Kohen, one of the priests, his job was just to read the faces of the Jews coming up the stairs. There were 15 steps. And on each step you would say a psalm of David called Shir HaMalos, the songs of ascents, because you were ascending up to the courtyard. And there was a Kohen who was up there. He was perched up there. His job was to watch everyone's faces. And the reason he was there to watch everyone's faces was to call to the conductor of the orchestra to let them know what to be playing at any given time. Let's say, for example, someone was bringing a sin offering, which is a sheep. He's bringing a sheep but by rote, meaning he did a sin by accident. A sheep offering is for an accidental sin. So he's bringing a sheep offering for an accidental sin. And but he keeps doing this all the time, meaning he's not getting his act together. He keeps bringing sheep. He must be a wealthy guy. He can afford to, every week there he is again with his sheep. So if the priest notices, the one who has the wisdom of the face, what's called, in Hebrew it's called Chochmas Partsuf. In English it's called,
Emotional intelligence.
it's called, what's the term of a person who's an expert in reading faces? Whatever. No, it's a fancy word. It's a fancy word. I always have it. I'm just a little hungover from my daughter's wedding right now. When you live such a clean existence and then you drink alcohol, and I drink so little alcohol that you wouldn't even say I drink. I mean, everyone wants to make a l'chaim with the father of the bride, so I had my shot glass and I was just like, l'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. But 100 of those, came out to about maybe 3 shots over 4 hours. And I was just wrecked this morning. Sometimes I wonder if I shouldn't drink alcohol every day, just so I can enjoy alcohol meaning not get so destroyed by it the following day,
It just says physiognomy.
Oh, thank you.
But
Oh no,
it's
physiognomy is not the term.
The person, though.
Yeah, the
It
person.
says face reading physiognomy.
Yeah. Ask, what do you call someone who can read physiognomy? Anyway. Oh, you know what? Maybe there is no term for it. I think the word I was looking for was that I used to translate Chachmas Partsuf as someone who could understand someone's physiognomy.
Yeah, because it doesn't say.
Yeah, I don't think there's a term like that. Anyway, physiognomy, by the way, is the study of one's face to tell the story of your life. You realize your face tells an amazing story of your life. I mean, some people's faces tell sad stories, but your story is all over your face. And my seminars, the Possible Use seminars, I'm running this seminar where everyone has to identify their narrative, their story. And it's all over their faces when they walk in, so I already kind of know everyone's story. I don't know any details. I mean, I don't know how many siblings they had. I don't know this. But you can tell who was embarrassed. You can tell who had a trauma and who was abused. And by the way, anyone who sets foot in that seminar are the cream of the crop of the most courageous people you meet. You understand? Like this, everyone knows it's not for the faint of heart. These are a more courageous, you know, they're what do you call it? A self-selecting. But one thing you know for sure is anyone who walks in there has a lot of courage and believes that there's something much greater than what they already have, and they're coming to get to the next level of their lives and bump it up and see where their blind spots are and get clear and move forward powerfully into life. But when they all walk in, I have strong physiognomy, meaning strong ability to read physiognomy. So it's really interesting to see it all get uncovered just through their faces and finally hear the words attached to the face. And sometimes I'm surprised, but rarely. Usually it's a story I could have made up. And that's already on the face of the person, which is pretty interesting. It's a nice thing to have the ability to read physiognomy, because you can, like you mentioned, empathy is you can be so much more empathic with people because you kind of get it before you get it. But you also have to be humble and not think you get things, because it's better just to shut up and let people share themselves. But let's say they're never gonna get a chance to share themselves. So then at least you can be compassionate in unique ways with people who, otherwise it's just not gonna be appropriate because they're just sitting on the other side of the table or in a big room of people. Yeah.
What about the idea that we, as humans, mirror each other, and that can be seen on someone's face?
How we mirror each other. Mm-hmm. What's an example you're thinking?
Well, depending on how you look at someone, that could change their facial expression.
Yeah, that's true.
Like subconsciously.
Yeah, sure. You ever tried turning everyone's faces into smiles? Walking out the street? It happened to me in Jaffa Gate. Amazing thing. I don't go through Jaffa Gate on foot very often, but one time I went by foot, and I went through Jaffa Gate, and there was some guy who was like really looking unhappy. And so I just gave him a big smile and said hello. I don't know, some random guy. And I got his face to shine. Which was just, wanted to give him that, and a little victory over his sourpuss. And what happened was really funny, because I looked back as he kept walking. I looked back, and there was a guy with the same face, like not smiling at all, sees him, and he smiled. Smiled, and then I just watched it go for a while. And then I kept walking into the old city, and so I followed this smile. A lot of people around, like today also was crowded. You guys notice how crowded the old city is today? So I just kept watching this smile, sometimes coming over whole tour groups. A lot of these people are tour groups, and they're passing this very smiley tour group, which is like, you pass 50 people smiling, and you're in your own tour group of 50, you wind up smiling back. And so it just kept going. I got to the hotel right before it arrived, because I had ways to snake through the old city. And I got to the hotel and just watched that smile move its way down until people were smiling at each other at the hotel. But I mean, these were like goofy smiles. This goofy smile made its way across the Jewish quarter from Jaffa Gate, from one person. And we have to understand that our face is public property. Your face is public property. If you're not smiling, stay home. If you're not smiling, just don't be a stink bug.
So the Kohen was watching, what was he looking for in the face? Like,
Well, I gave one example, is he was looking for someone who was going to offer an animal by rote, meaning he's like,
not good feeling.
yeah, he keeps doing it wrong. He keeps doing the same thing, and he keeps bringing a sheep. This has become almost a loop, like a lifestyle.
So what would he do?
He would know. Then he would say "Lam natseak" to the conductor.